Greetings, you joyfully miserable accursed. It's David Hurley here with the political panel that lives by the maxim there's no discussion without a cuss and a diss in there. Jordan Leichnitz, Fred DeLorean, Scott Reed. How are you today, folks? Everybody okay?
Doing good. It's going up to 14 in Ottawa today.
Wow.
The end is here. We've made it.
You think it's spring? This is it? This is not a
No,
false
this
move?
is fall spring for sure.
Yeah, I love fall spring.
We're going to enjoy it.
Scott?
Fall spring is beautiful. I put away all my jackets, my boots. I start wearing, like a halter top, and then poof, it snows right out of the. But that's okay. I just ignore that because I know it's going away. And
did you wash your kid's snowsuit? Because if it snows again, that's on you then.
No, I don't wash my kids.
And what is this?
Look at me. Do I look like the kind of guy I was up early
I
this
just want to make
morning?
sure that none of you are ruining it for the rest of us.
No. But I was, I was sunbathing yesterday. I just, smeared cooking oil all over my body and slapped down in that 17-degree heat. It was fantastic.
Fred, what did normal people do this weekend?
I drove to lots of sporting events with my 4 kids, including went to an OHL game yesterday, which was fun. I will maintain, I think hockey would be much better 3-on-3 than 5-on-5.
Right.
But lots of traveling and driving around in circles.
Who goes to OHL games in cities that have NHL teams?
It was packed, so lots of people, young families, I think, would be the core. It's a much cheaper ticket than an NHL. It's also in Ottawa, right? The Senators are in Canada, which is an hour from where I live.
It's far. Right. Nobody wants to be in that traffic.
Funny little trivia bit. Canada is actually an hour from Canada. There's nothing technically near where the Senators play.
Right.
Oh fuck, I remember when they built that thing, Bill Fox said to me, if I'm getting on the highway to go to a hockey game, I'm going to the Forum in Montreal.
He said that to Randy Sexton. It was a dinner that we were all at, and Randy Sexton came over and tried to sell us tickets, and he said, if I'm getting on a fucking highway to see a hockey game, it's to see the Habs. I'm going to the Forum. I'll never forget that.
All right, here's our rundown for this week. So much competition for our political mind space last week. Mark Carney's tour of the East, the war in Iran, the Prime Minister's shifting commentary, Pierre Poilievre's foreign policy and European tour. NDP are approaching voting for their leadership. What broke through and what will end up mattering politically. Then Carney has called 3 by-elections for April 13th, 2 in Toronto, 1 in Quebec. Is there a thin majority in the offing here? What are the implications for a potential general election? Our first clipping is Aaron Wary's piece for CBC News on Carney's and Poilievre's different approaches to the Canada-U.S. relationship and what that's going to mean for the political debate going forward. Finally, the beautiful baritone from Somewhere Beyond, Gordon Pinsent, brings us to a close with our Hey Yous. So, Fred, let's start with you. I mean, there was a jam-packed week last week, and I want to not really talk about the substance of any of it because none of us are experts in the substance of any of it. But if you're a person who lives in the Ottawa bubble, who's a consultant or works in politics or in media, there was just so much news last week. There was all the things we've talked about. Carney's tour, Poilievre's tour, the Iran war, the NDP leadership. But the question is, for a person, just a Canadian, just living their lives, did they notice any of that? And if so, what did they notice and what will its import be?
Well, look, I think there's 2 interesting things where we had a prime minister looking like a prime minister going out and doing world events or world travel when he's talked about opening up Canadian markets. And we had a leader of the opposition trying to look like a prime minister in waiting by doing something quasi similar. Going out to his little European trip, which I don't recall a leader of the opposition doing a trip like that. It's a bit unusual. I think it's the times.
Joe Clark.
Before my time, sorry.
Technically, he won the next election.
Right. So look, it's the time for it, right? But I think it was interesting though, where Poilievre went out and made some policy or had some discussions, I guess, about getting Canadian energy with the Germans. But what popped, obviously the Iran war is a big thing, and I think the Prime Minister's shifting message is what kind of stood out, and who is he trying to talk to with that messaging, where I thought it was solid when he came out right away in supporting what was happening there. And as someone who would be more aligned with that myself, and then seeing a few days later him shifting, and then going back and forth. And I think at the end of the week, we're hearing he's not ruling out getting involved at some level. So I think that's one of the things that may come long term from what happened this week, is, where are we on this? And does the Prime Minister still have a lot to learn about communication and how to have a actual message you stick to and make sure your team sticks to it? Because I think they were a bit wobbly on that this week.
Yeah, on Iran, for sure. Scott. So we've been laser focused on sovereignty here in this space on behalf of our presenting sponsor, TELUS, specifically on the need to put a defined set of standards around what is truly Canadian and what is not. A tiering system is what TELUS is advocating for. So the government's Buy Canadian policy can do what it's supposed to, support Canada investing in itself, in the form of jobs, industries, and national security. The top tier would give the highest priority to Canadian companies who not only wear their maple leaf colored hearts on their sleeve, but have their headquarters here and invest long term in Canadian innovation and employment. But a tiering system, by definition, includes versus excludes. The reality is we need the world to keep investing in Canada, and we don't want to cause unnecessary harm to our closest trading partners. So the system also makes room for foreign-controlled firms who have significant operations and meaningful investments here. A couple of other considerations. Whether it's TELUS or others, Canada is stronger when Canadian companies can flourish and grow outside our own borders, in addition to their successes here. No policy we put in place here at home should, in any way, contribute to hindering that growth. And not every government project has the same kind of requirements. Some need the highest levels of Canadian control, security, and sovereignty. Some don't. For all these reasons, TELUS believes a tiered approach makes sense because it makes the space. Genuinely Canadian firms get material advantage in support of the government's aims, and foreign companies with presence here still participate and prosper. More next week. Scott, it just felt to me like Poilievre had a really bad luck in the sense that there was so much news that it was hard for his trip to get the kind of oxygen he might have hoped for.
I think that's right. And I don't know if that matters terribly. Was his real purpose to generate a ton of news, or is it just to start to get into a habit of forming different habits as a politician that will eventually pay off and will present him as a more serious person? I think, some people kind of glibly go, well, he's just imitating Carney now. I'm not sure that's 100% what he's trying to do. I think what he's really trying to do is to fix the serious deficit, right? That he just doesn't look like a serious person who's taking the world seriously or the task seriously at a really, really serious time. And so I thought there was a sobriety to the trip. I don't think, to my eye, didn't seem like there were any big gaffes or any kind of, failures of any sort. And so if you look at what his real project is, it probably still matters. I don't know that he needed an immediate short-term payoff with people saying, my God, I'm convinced he's Churchill on the world stage. I thought I'm really fascinated by the communications issue around the Prime Minister. I mean, it was a wobbly week in the sense that we were kind of all straining to say what's being said here and why. I think my ultimate...
Well, opponents were attacking and supporters were explaining.
That's right. That was exactly what was happening. And there was, I kind of thought I caught a hint of defiance from the Prime Minister, which is like, I'm not going to be told that I need to dumb it down or change or...
Just a hint, Scott?
Yeah, I thought I kind of a pastiche of that. But just a thimbleful, as my grandma Kerr would say. But I don't think as much of it mattered as much as we think. I think on the whole, well, he came out definitively in favor of Iran. Then, he was allowing for concerns about how the war is developing.
Do you have a speculation as to what caused the change in emphasis?
I think the inevitable prosecution on the war. I think two factors. I think one is a deference to Canadian public opinion, which fundamentally it's not even about the war. It's Canadians don't have confidence in the motives or the judgment of Trump, and that lack of confidence
Canadians
is being
are
validated
wise.
on a daily basis. Canadians are wise, which is actually why the point I wanted to make was that I think that first portion where people were jumping all over it, I think that matters less than people think, because I think the Canadians actually are more sophisticated than people give them credit for. I think they can be like, all right, he took a hardline position and seemed like he was fully in favor and then was modifying it. I can live with all that because, crazy shit's happening and Trump is crazy and the world's unfolding. I thought the thing that was more problematic and that has the potential still to punch through was his was the possibility of involvement, was allowing for that. I think that could be politically damaging. I thought that was where there was a requirement for clarity. And I thought we were going to get that on Friday when they said, a little bit out of expectation. I mean, I got a call from CTV saying, hey, you got to get your ass in front of a television at 6:00. He's going to hold a newser. We were all expecting, at least the folks I was working with and preparing for that, we were expecting the Prime Minister to come forward and effectively respond to the Globe and Mail headline, which says Carney refuses to shut the door on participation, right? And he didn't really. I mean, he repeated what he said, and it had a tone of, "Are you gonna? I hope you fucking get it this time." And I think I get what he's saying. I think what he's saying is, I don't want to allow. And we've seen a missile now be shot down over Turkey by NATO forces. I think he wanted to allow for the possibility that Article 5 may get invoked and we may actually have to participate. So they've constructed this language of, we will not participate in an offensive operation. And I think he thinks that means that he's created an architecture that therefore allows him to leave open the possibility of a defensive involvement that's NATO oriented, but depending on how I just don't think to my mind, I don't know what the harm is in just stepping forward to the mic and say, if a NATO ally is attacked, then we have treaty obligations. Beyond that, there isn't a tinker's chance in hell that we're going to get involved in ground troops.
But since that seems obvious, doesn't it mean that there's 30 people from Global Affairs that are telling him why he can't precisely say that?
I suppose so. But I think there's an imperative here. And then there's another complexion and a possibility, which, I mean, there could be a real politic going on, because two things happened as well in the last 72 hours. One was that Dominic LeBlanc met with Jemison Greer, and two, Trump and Carney had a conversation. The readout was absolutely impenetrable. It was 2 sentences long, didn't tell us sweet fuck all. So, I mean, was it just about an update on the prosecution of the war? Was he sharing his plans to take over Cuba? Was he talking about the future of CUSMA? Is there a CUSMA calculation going in to some of this? I don't know. My read is he just didn't want to clarify it in the way he was being told by smart Alex on TV. He should clarify it. And it was kind of a bit of his defiance.
Right. You may want assurances that any charity you support makes maximum use of your money, that it goes to the cause you want to support, rather than hefty marketing fees and fundraising commissions. Our sponsor, CN, has the same concern, which is why the railway has committed $1.5 million over 3 years to an organization called Hockey Helps the Homeless. Helping and protecting unsheltered people, particularly in a winter as ferocious as the one we are currently enduring, should be a priority for any civil society. And Hockey Helps the Homeless guarantees that every dime of its net proceeds not only goes to sheltering and educating some of the most vulnerable among us, but that the money is used in the city where it was raised. Charity begins and stays at home, so to speak. This is the 30th anniversary of Hockey Helps the Homeless. The charity has built a base of 20,000 donors, 3,000 hockey players, and 1,000 volunteers that participate in events all season. Since 1996, it has granted over $33 million to more than 60 homeless support agencies across Canada. And this week, on March 13th, CN's team of track supervisors, foremen, welders, machine operators, and one government relations manager will lace on skates and enter the Hockey Helps the Homeless Ottawa tournament. It is estimated that on any given night, 1,400 men, women, and children are homeless in the national capital. Proceeds from the Ottawa tournament will support the Shepherds of Good Hope, which, believe me, will make excellent use of the money. If you want to donate, visit hockeyhelpsthehomeless.com. Protecting vulnerable people is the very definition of a good cause. You can help. Jordan, what do you think mattered politically this week?
I mean, I think what rose to the top was the pretzel on Iran, and actually not just on Iran, on India and security concerns as well. I think that significantly overshadowed Carney's trip. How it matters, of course, I think is going to depend a great deal on how the war develops. But I think it was funny. I'm sure you guys watched the Prime Minister's Q&A in Australia, and I noticed he has another kind of funny tell when he doesn't want to answer a question. The more he doesn't want to be specific and answer the question, the more Latin creeps into his response. There's a direct correlation. So for Poilievre, the tell is how often are the Stoics invoked? And for the Prime Minister, it's the more Latin you get, the more he is not fucking explaining himself. Yeah, and look, exactly. And look, I think
raise hips and lockwater.
The Prime Minister's handling of what's happened on Iran is bad and puzzling. Because as we talked a little bit about last week, what I was really struck with was the speed at which he came out with that initial statement, really yoking Canada quite unequivocally to Trump's actions in Iran, to launching the strikes with Israel, just yep, we're in support of this. There is no reason to do that. There's no reason to do that without consulting. There's no reason to do that without talking to caucus, talking to cabinet, talking to your allies. But he didn't do any of those things. He just went out and had the position. And so as a consequence of not bringing anybody along with him this week, when things evolved, as is entirely predictable when President Trump is involved in these things, I think it needs to be pointed out. We do have templates here that we can look to. We can look to, for example, his involvement in Venezuela, where the stated goal was regime change only to reinforce the existing regime. So we know that these things are a moving target when it comes to Trump, which makes it even more puzzling that the Prime Minister would have come out so quickly and so strongly to endorse the action, because I'm sure, David, to your point, there were also 30 people at Global Affairs screaming at him not to do that last weekend. But he did it anyway. So that leads me to believe that that's out of a personal conviction of some sort. He has spoken about Iran in the past, and he certainly views it as a significant threat to global security. But he got out over his skis on that. And then the handling in terms of how that's evolving over the week was also very uneven. The back and forth about whether Canada might participate in some way militarily and the muddied communications around that, I think, to be very generous, there is evidently a real difference between participating in offensive action that's being led by the U.S. and Israel that is not United Nations sanctioned, that is not part of that is not a NATO mission in any way. That is very different than our NATO obligations being triggered because of an attack on a NATO ally. But that's also not what he's out there articulating, right? So I think it's really interesting that in this week where they managed to tie themselves up, not just on this issue, but also on India, where you had in a background briefing, journalists asking an incredibly reasonable question, which is, are we pursuing this trade agreement while India is still engaging in interference in Canada? And folks on background saying, we don't think it's happening anymore. And then the foreign affairs minister and the prime minister saying, well, maybe, I wouldn't quite say that. So again, those are predictable, reasonable questions that would come in that were really fumbled. And I think the thing that's interesting on Iran, there were opportunities all along the way for the prime minister just to say a little bit less. If he wasn't ready to explain and to make that case, be a little less reactive, say a little less, have those conversations internally, do those consultations with Europe, with allies, and come out with a little bit of cover and with some people behind you. But that's not what he elected to do. And I think that the political risk of that is now becoming clearer as things drag on. We don't, I think, of course, at some point, Trump is likely to unroll a mission accomplished banner and get out of Dodge, but that hasn't happened yet. And in the meantime, You've got Tehran that looks like an apocalypse. This is a city of 10 million. Civilian, infrastructure is being hit. There's been civilian deaths. And so this is evolving in a way that is very messy and that I think could be politically dangerous for the prime minister because he hasn't really brought anybody along with him on it. And maybe just, do you want a word on Poilievre and his trip? Because I'll say two things about that. I actually think it's not unusual for opposition leaders to go and do foreign trips. In fact, Tom Mulcair did that. Actually, Jagmeet Singh did foreign trips as well. That's pretty common. But what is unusual is you would normally do it early in your mandate. You would do it. It's part of defining your brand as a serious prime ministerial candidate. It's also, it's something you do a little bit earlier on. And what's really notable is that for Poilievre, not only did he not do that, but he was virulently opposed to any kind of involvement like that. He would not speak with foreign embassies. He would not speak with any kind of organization that was involved abroad on any of these things. His office actually really cut all of that contact off for the first years of his leadership. So this is a huge change for him. I think the fact of him going alone is really significant in terms of signaling how things are shifting inside his office.
Yeah, that is all interesting. I think, and I remember this because I'm old, but because I'm old, I may be remembering it wrong. I think Mulroney met with Reagan. I think Mulroney went down to Washington when he was opposition leader and met with the president. Right? So
which was
that was
a
a big
huge
stick.
deal.
That was a big stick to pull out. You may have heard me talk once or twice in this space about Canada's industrial carbon pricing system. A couple of reasons for that. It's an important part of the Canada-Alberta MOU that's made so much news over the past month, and also because our sponsor, the Canadian Climate Institute, has a vast amount of expert research and analysis about the policy. In their view, some of the debate on this issue has become untethered from data or facts. Here are the high-level need-to-knows. First, the MOU agrees that Alberta will strengthen its industrial carbon pricing system. The question is, what will it cost the oil sands sector in Canada? That's where the discussion has recently detached itself from fact. Fortunately, the Climate Institute has two new numbers for this. They've looked at what the system costs oil sands producers today. The answer is 9 cents per barrel of oil. That's your first number. Very low, especially when you consider a barrel is currently going for around $85 or more. The second number is 50 cents per barrel. That's what the average cost would be in 2030. As long as the MOU makes good on reaching a $130 per ton carbon credit price by the end of the decade. Still very low. So low that when inflation is factored in, the cost would be equal to 1 Timbit per barrel, which means minimal impact on industry competitiveness. That's by design, of course, and one of the many reasons the policy is so attractive. It makes big cuts to emissions as it preserves economic opportunities. And it provides powerful incentives for producers to make big investments in low-carbon technologies. You can find out more at climateinstitute.ca. Hey, Fred, I've been interested watching the Liberal caucus because these people would not fucking speak up when their political lives were on the line when Justin Trudeau was the leader at the end, and they would just shuffle in and out of caucus meetings like nothing was wrong. And now Carney goes on a trip and he says something some of them don't like about India, and he says something some of them don't like about Iran. And now all of a sudden they're muscular, these people. All of a sudden they've got a point of view and they're demanding briefings and demanding meetings. What the hell's going on there?
Well, this Liberal Party, was not built by Mark Carney. It was built by Justin Trudeau. In 2015, like this whole, the Liberal caucus is elected by Justin Trudeau under his leadership. So they had, I think, immense loyalty to him, even when he was leading them right into the gutter. They were about to get completely wiped out, and the vast majority seemed to hold the line with him. And Carney's inherited that group. That's who he's leading right now. The vast majority of his cabinet comes from the Trudeau era. So this is a different type of Liberal than I'd say the traditional party. This is more left wing. This is more progressive than, say, centrist that some liberal parties are. So that's going to be a growing issue for Carney as he goes down the road as, as a progressive conservative prime minister, and does open up some room potentially for the NDP if they ever get their act together and get into that progressive vote anyway. But no, this is a caucus that I would say is potentially very volatile for Carney. Now, again, at the end of the day, they are liberals. They just prefer to win. The numbers are good right now, so maybe they'll just stick with that. But I don't know. It's something that I would keep a very close eye on. If I was Carney, I'd be trying to figure out ways how to keep this group happy and under him.
Do you think, ironically, Scott, they are more liberated at 49% than they were at 19%?
I don't know. I don't know. You know what? I don't know. I kind of don't care. Like, I mean, I this is probably exactly the wrong impulse, but you're just like, are you serious, man? And I guess in abstract, it doesn't hurt for the prime minister to be challenged. It doesn't hurt to learn some skills of calling people up, taking them for tea, making sure that they stay in line, all that stuff. Those are good things to learn. Today is the first anniversary of Mark Carney becoming prime minister. He's had astonishing ahistorical success, but, not to say that he can't learn new tricks. So it's all good, I suppose. But I look at the Hill Times with people and they run to the Hill Times, so it's like something that's covered by like 4 blocks, right? And I'm not dissing the Hill Times, love it. But they run to the Hill Times and go, well, I'm not very happy. I expect to be briefed in advance.
It's an important service, but it's not a broad reach.
Right.
That's
and it's sort of, it's like, I expect to be consulted in advance. Really? I expect you to be grateful. I expect you to be very grateful. You would be fucking working, right? You'd be selling teen burgers right now, man. Come on.
Well, as Pierre Poilievre learned, sometimes it's good to take people along with you on the way up, or they may not be with you on the way down. So this is also a future investment.
I fully acknowledge that, but I can understand why the prime minister might.
Oh, since you're full of your oats there, Jordan, since you're full of your oats, of the things that did not get any space in the news hole last week, it's the fucking NDP leadership race.
Yeah, totally.
Which is approaching a conclusion without anybody having known it's on. And one of the things that interests me about that is what is the difference? What is the impact of having a race in which all of the inputs are internal, essentially? There's no external inputs. Like in many of the races I've been involved in or observed, the public is somewhat engaged, and the public's reaction to a candidate or can change the dynamic of the race. Like if you're, you can see people coming from behind who aren't the front runner catching on with Canadians and making the story more interesting and changing the dynamic. There is no external Canadian dynamic in this. We have no idea whether people are going to cotton on to Avi Lewis or Heather McPherson or anything like that, because there's been literally no exposure to this race as near as I can tell with the general public.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it difficult to ascertain what the traditional dynamic is, which is who's got some ability to attract people.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does put more pressure on the party members to evaluate things through that lens. But I think in due fairness, every leadership race is primarily an internal conversation. And of course, this last year, and particularly this last 6 months.
Wait, I just want to stop you because that isn't actually true. Because many leadership races, you've actually seen public opinion change during the course of that race. You've seen. Right. You've seen parties grow in support because of a leadership race. That has not happened to the NDP in this context.
Yeah, but we're also in a really unusual political circumstance as well. So it's a fire hose of political news. And I think in fairness, any party would have a bit of a struggle to capture attention over the last 6 months. Now, that said, obviously, the NDP being a smaller party, it is going to have a smaller share also of the coverage on this. And I think, that goes along with things like fewer public domain polls that are tracking, for example, approval of the various candidates, lower name recognition of all of the various candidates that would make those polls even, a bit less significant and reliable, right? So those external inputs are not going to be quite the same. I think that the conversation internally in the party has been relatively diverse so far. So, you have had really kind of three main camps who are sort of duking it out really over that question, like what is going to mobilize the public. So you've got Labor making a particular case. You have the more sort of mainstream elements of the party, particularly linked to the provincial sections in the West, making a different case. And then you have the left flank of the party making, in turn, a third case. And so I think that has been an internal part of the conversation. But you're right, it hasn't garnered a lot of interest outside of the party. And I think they would have struggled to do so regardless, given the environment we're in.
The following message is brought to you by Unsmoke Canada. Not all nicotine products carry the same risk. Smoke-free alternatives like heated tobacco, vaping products, and nicotine pouches don't burn tobacco or produce smoke. While not risk-free, evidence shows they have the potential to be significantly less harmful than cigarettes. Yet, Canadian regulations restrict access and limit communication about these alternatives, keeping adult smokers in the dark. Sweden has accepted this science, embraced smoking harm reduction, and driven smoking rates below 6%. Canada has the tools to do the same, but it requires political will. It's time to align regulation with science, expand access to smoke-free products, and empower Canadians to make informed choices. The evidence is clear. The opportunity is real. Canada can be smoke-free. Learn more at unsmoke.ca.
You know, Jordan, just to follow up, it seems to me that the people who must be at some level exerting influence, who have the most at stake in this race, are the provincial parties that are competitive for government in Western Canada.
Not just Western Canada. Yeah. I mean, look, the NDP is government or official opposition in 6 provinces across the country. So there is absolutely a huge stake for the provincial sections in this. And, you can hear debates about, well, would provincial sections disaffiliate from the federal party or whatever. But I find that like a bit of a silly debate because, of course, no political opponent at the provincial level is going to say, oh, of course, you are not officially linked to the federal party. I will cease my attacks. So there is absolutely a stake for all of those provincial sections, particularly the ones that are more electorally competitive in the outcome of this race. And I think, to varying degrees, they have been involved in this race, but, they're going to have to live with the consequences of it for sure.
Right. Fred, who do you think the Conservative Party wants to win this race?
Oh, it'd be someone, I would say Heather McPherson, who seems to be the most, quote unquote, normal of the bunch. Conservatives need the NDP to do well for us to be able to do well. We need that vote split. It's the only path. When 60% of Canadians identify as being progressive, that only leaves 40 for us. We need you guys to split that vote up.
Probably you want somebody who competes with the Liberals in urban centers, but not in working class centers.
Right. That's exactly what Fred wants.
Yeah, that's the dream. That's the dream. But it looks like if Avi Lewis wins the leadership race, he seems more extreme, getting rid of the military and nationalizing grocery stores and all. If that happens, then that is another huge horseshoe up Carney's butt. Because he will not.
In fairness, I don't think he said either of those things, Fred.
Oh, I'm pretty sure he has. I can pull the quotes for you.
By the time the ads are over, he will have.
But look, it's bad news. It's bad news for Conservatives if someone like Lewis wins because he will continue. He will also scare a lot of people to the Liberal Party if you're afraid of some of his views and also just not eat into that vote. So that's bad news. But I will just to say what Jordan and what you're saying, David, about the public influencing leadership races. I've never heard of or seen anything like that before because I think the NDP and the Conservatives are very similar where our leadership races are a fight for the heart and soul of our parties. We don't care what the public thinks. We have our own views and our views are the right views is the way a lot of our members would think. I think the Liberal Party has the benefit of when you have leadership races, you're seeing who can win the next election. It's a very different question, and that's why you guys tend to win way more federal elections than we do.
Yeah, I guess I'm drawing back on some relatively ancient history when a guy like Jean Charest would take a race that was seen to be in the bag for Kim Campbell. And just by the sheer fact of proving that actually people liked him as opposed to her could change the nature of that race and make it very, very close. Similarly, Kretschmann came close to beating Turner in '84 for exactly the same reason. So there was a time when these things and frankly, I think that it happened in a way with Carney and Freeland in the last Liberal race, where there was an immediate public reaction that I think Liberals took paid attention to.
Is there someone, I don't want to continue on forever. Sorry, Jordan, if this is boring, but like, if it's happening under dead of night, then does that benefit one candidate or the other? Like, does it benefit McPherson because then people and power brokers within the party, undisturbed by broader public opinion and forces, can just sort of work their magic and cut arrangements, and hopefully that makes it more predictable and she can win? Or does it help Avi Lewis, who appears to be a little bit more militant, and therefore he can try to run it out, and there's not this big ABL movement that may be aided by public opinion and public attention could form?
Well, I mean, I think it puts more emphasis on the organizing element for sure. And so that's the membership sign up period. I think that when you don't have as much outside public pressure, then to a degree it becomes more of a numbers game, right? So and that, you know, that period has long closed for the party. So membership signups are finished. And you saw a growth of about 40,000 members over existing membership. So that's, you know, that I think is going to be one of the biggest factors. Who was able to sign up the most of those members? Are they able to hold them through the period to the vote? And then, you know, again, as we've talked about before, what will also matter is if it's not taken on the first ballot, for example, by Avi, then what's your capacity for growth as the other candidates start to drop off the ballot? So I think it's far more of an organizing issue at this point. It's who you were able to bring into the party and keep in your camp. And then secondary to that, what's your capacity to grow with supporters of other candidates?
I'm cheering for Orville Redenbacher.
You mean Tony? You like Tony's hat?
Tony, Mr. Green Jeans.
All right. Affordability isn't just the price of a home anymore. It's groceries, it's childcare, it's energy. Surveys tell us the same thing again and again. Affordability is the number one issue on people's minds. Our sponsor, Enbridge Gas, understands that. Natural gas helps keep energy costs predictable and manageable, so families aren't surprised every time a bill shows up. It's dependable energy delivered. But affordability doesn't just happen. Behind the scenes, teams of highly skilled Enbridge Gas folks are working months and years ahead, designing the system, maintaining it, stress testing it, long before anyone ever sees a bill. They know customers want value for their energy dollar, whether it's a family of 4 in Toronto or a large greenhouse in Leamington. Keeping energy costs manageable for Ontario homes and businesses is at the center of what Enbridge Gas does. A big part of this work happens at the Dawn Storage Hub. Natural gas is stored underground when demand is lower and prices are steadier, then delivered when demand spikes. That storage acts like a shock absorber, helping smooth volatility and keeping costs in check. Energy affordability doesn't need to be another thing to worry about. All right, Aaron Wherry from the CBC is, if I might say, a regularly very astute observer of Canadian politics. He has written something that I think we're going to be talking about for the next couple of years, and let me just read a segment of it. Canada's prosperity and security are inseparable from a stable relationship with the United States, Poilievre said at the Economic Club of Canada last week. And that is why we should not declare a permanent rupture with our biggest customer and closest neighbor in favor of a strategic partnership for a new world order with Beijing. Carney has said Canada's old relationship with the United States is over. And it's possible Poilievre sees things differently, a difference that first seemed to emerge during last year's election campaign. At the end of the day, President Trump will be in the position for the next 3 years, Poilievre said during a question and answer session after his speech. We have a relationship with the United States of America that is centuries old, and it will survive centuries later. So we have to keep our mind on the long-term interest of our country and focus on the things that will protect the jobs and livelihoods of the people here in Canada. In his remarks last week, Poilievre said he would be willing to sacrifice Chinese EV imports in exchange for a tariff-free auto pact with the United States. So, Scott, let's start with you.
Sure.
Let's start with you on this. They've got a cleavage. They've got a defensible point of view. But to me, it is a trap over time because it leads them to, in almost every conflict scenario with the Trump administration over the next couple of years, it leads the conservatives to having to downplay that and having to somehow be less outraged, less muscular in their defense of Canada in that response, because they've now laid out that it is the primary imperative to protect the Canada-US relationship.
Right. I'll just start by saying I recognize how tricky this is. They're having to triangulate a whole series of considerations here. They need to distinguish themselves from Carney, because if it is a carbon copy, then they lose. On the other hand, they need to have a point of view that is reasonable and attractive to those beyond the MAGA core. So they have a bunch of considerations. There's traditional positions that they've taken. The easiest place for them to go is, and therefore our prescription is cut taxes, cut business taxes. It's like, oh, okay, it just turns out the things that you've been selling for the last 45 years also happen to be just the right recipe for this completely unprecedented circumstance we find ourselves. Shocker. But so with recognition that they have a tricky bit of business to pull off here, I am less respectful of the substantive position that's been articulated than many observers, as far as I can tell, because people are sort of speaking, oh, it's really impressive. We got to take it seriously. I think it's one part manufactured bullshit, which is that the ambition is to replace the United States with China. I don't think that's the ambition at all. I think that's completely inflated, and again, it's meant to allow them to sort of have a point of political difference and hang on to their CCP, fuck them kind of and all that. Okay, great. And then the second component is false hope. And the false hope is, maybe it's one that I subscribe to. It'd be lovely if we could have the world go back to the way that it was. But I think Carney's right and he's wrong. I think the world is not going back. I think the world is different. I think that the relationship is broken. It doesn't mean that we don't work out the best possible arrangement we can and make it as productive as possible, particularly if Trump ever leaves the White House, which who knows, maybe he won't. But it's based on false hope in the sense that it is based on a notion of, we can just normalize this relationship and it will be going back to normal. And that's the way we want it. And it's epitomized by that quote you just said. If we just have a tariff-free auto sector, then, okay, yeah. Well, it's not on the fucking table, man. Like, of course, if there's a tariff-free auto sector deal, he wants to demolish it.
There are huge trade-offs embedded in this policy, and I doubt they've escaped the sight of everybody involved. For example, that last line, I would be willing to sacrifice Chinese EV imports for a tariff-free auto pact. That means it's Poilievre's policy not to have removed the tariffs on canola, which is a stunning position for a federal conservative. But it's a choice.
It's a choice.
That.
So he's saying I can take that vote for granted.
They saw it and they said, we're going to consciously. Just like Carney, people can say, holy fuck, I have never seen a Liberal prime minister choose a Saskatchewan industry over an Ontario industry. You're now having seen the reverse, which is you're seeing a Conservative leader choose an Ontario industry over a Saskatchewan industry. It's pretty interesting.
It's because it's based on false hope. And what can we do to get back to forming a working relationship with the United States? I see it online all the time from conservative voices. It is false hope. And I think it takes you to a disastrous political place because, as you say, David, it means that you actually end up having to tolerate. And somehow, and culturally, I suppose, that's less difficult for them. But it means that you have to tolerate and hope to tolerate Trump's conduct. And I'll give you a perfect example of how this is not going to work. This week, oil has gone to $1.20. The pump is going to blow up. It's going to be incredibly costly to fill your car. You want to know what's going to drive domestic politics in Canada and the United States? Fucking gas that's 170 cents a liter. That's what's going to drive change. And so I do think that, this feels like I'm really harsh about it because I think it's been stitched together and it's gotten a lot of kind of, I think, unthinking applause by by people when, if you look at it, I think it's unfunctional.
Fred.
I will counter that. I disagree. I think there is hope here. I think the U.S. Canadian relationship will normalize down the road. It's going to take time. It's going to take the removal of current political leaders who are a part of this. And
It's going to take Canadian conservatives campaigning for Democrats in the United States.
maybe whatever it takes, but when it happens, when there's a change there, there is going to be like we are each other's largest trading partner. We have so much tied history together. Our cultures are so tied together. Our top movies, the top podcasts in Canada, the top, our sports teams
Hey,
are
hey.
not top Canadian made, but the top listened to political podcasts or podcasts in general are
I
American.
don't know, man.
Jesus,
We are
Fred.
I
high-
don't get stopped in
I'm
Kentucky and ask for
spitting-
my
I'm
autograph too
spitting
often.
Messaging starts at
folks.
home, Fred. Come
I'm
on.
spitting facts here, and I'm saying that this relationship will normalize at some point. There is going to be tension. May always be some sort of tension, but we can't think that we're just going to move on from that. And so I think going out there with a plan and saying something about how I think Polyev is right that we are going to get there. It is going to be hard. It's going to take time, and we do need to get our products to to other markets around the world. I think that's a big wake up call we've had. We've had too much in the U.S. basket, but that's still the biggest basket we're going to be selling to for all of our lives, and we shouldn't get off of that point.
Jordan?
Counterpoint. He's not implementing any of this anytime soon. So I think it's a lot more interesting what this does for him politically in terms of where he is shifting the conservative focus. And actually, I think kind of backtracking on some of the positions that he had earlier on. So one of the things that really struck me, and we talked about this last week as well, is there's so much overlap between what Poilievre is talking about and a lot of what Carney is talking about. In fact, I think if you look at Poilievre's speech, about 80% of that is solidly overlapped with a lot of the things that Carney is discussing, and they're a matter of degree or emphasis. So fine. That poses one problem for the Conservatives, which is differentiation. So, people are going to maybe look for the real thing. They're going to look for the person they view as competent in that rather than the copy of that you're seeing from the Conservatives. That's one challenge, is that the cookies that you're going to get for moving into that space are pretty limited among voters. The second challenge is, I think that when you look at sort of the 20% of we'll call it the Poilievre doctrine, that really does differ from Carney, which is, as David said, it pertains to how permanent the rupture with the US is and where Canada's orientation should be in dealing with Trump. Like, do we view this as a temporary problem, or do we view this as a really long-term break? And I think that what's really interesting is not necessarily that he's pushed himself into a space where he's not going to be able to criticize Trump. I think he will still be able to do that. Whether he stays on that track is a different question. And I think that has more to do with the management of his base. But for me, what's really interesting is I was thinking back to the Poilievre who went down to Bay Street and told the CEOs, don't fucking come and lobby me. I'm not your mouthpiece. And now he's really the one who in the public sphere is advocating and is advancing the argument that you are hearing primarily from Bay Street, from the business community, which is that the focus on getting an agreement on CUSMA should be the central thing that the
Goldie
Canadian...
Hyder line.
Exactly. This should be the central thing the Canadian government is doing. But the challenge there is that actually, most Canadians are not there. So, less than half of Canadians actually think that CUSMA is the be-all, end-all of our trade relationship with the U.S. I don't think that case has really been made in the public, and it puts him in a position where he's defending, I think, an argument that is actually not that appealing politically to defend. If you look at what has actually worked for Poilievre, and if you strip out all of the sort of dickishness and the apple chomping and all that stuff that really limited his growth, the thing that was very successful for him and has been throughout the duration of his leadership is that he was always able to be the one who was speaking at the household level in Canada, that he was the one who was talking about the pocketbook, the affordability, the impacts of these big macroeconomic trends on your household. What I think is a challenge for them in what they're articulating here and what he's putting out in terms of his position on the trade relationship is that he's now in this other space. He's out there talking, again, it's at a very high level. And now he's advancing this argument that a lot of Canadians don't really agree with, that is kind of something that is Bay Street backed and is like pretty selective in terms of the number of people who actually agree with it. And politically, it's a bit unpalatable because Canadians really do have an appetite to stand up to the US right now. And lastly, I think it's a bit of a detriment to him because he is also sacrificing a little bit of that historic advantage that he's had, which is that he can speak to that household level stuff. And look, this is a big weakness for Carney. So even though Canadians, broadly speaking, approve of his economic plan, if you ask them, do you actually think this is going to improve your life, your household finances? Like only about a quarter of them think that that's the case. So there is a gap there for the opposition to be operating in. And I think that Poilievre has not done a good job of threading that needle and keeping that advantage as he's going and correcting on some of the other things that have been a detriment to him.
Well, I'll just
By the
jump
way,
in
it's
and say
kind
he
of-
just
yeah, go ahead,
started
Fred.
on this. He
Yeah.
just started talking about the U.S. relationship. We've been waiting for a few years for that to happen. He's there now. He's getting onto that battlefield. But I do think at his core is those pocketbook issues that he'll be getting back to, would be my guess. I don't think he's going to be out consistently on the U.S. relationship. I think it is about affordability and crime and things that has worked for him. I would imagine that's where he's going to be going.
We're in kind of a crazy negotiating position, right? Where the Americans have made it clear that they don't give a shit whether CUSMA exists or not. And we're saying we can't live without it. Like that's really a bad sort of way to be going into a set of
It's not
negotiations.
great.
Let's quickly talk about the by-elections the Prime Minister called over the weekend. Two apparently safe Liberal seats. A phrase that would have been laughable a year ago. Two safe Liberal seats in Toronto, and one could not be more marginal seat in Quebec. Could not mathematically be more marginal than Terrebonne. And of course, the combined expertise on Quebec politics on this podcast is enormous. So we should dwell on the prospects for each of the various parties in Terrebonne. No. What can we add to this conversation, Scott Reed?
Oh my, you're such a snark. This is important, man. These three by-elections are going to result in a decision as to whether or not Carney actually secures a majority without having actually to go to a general election. I think the most obvious implication is it signals to me, until someone convinces me otherwise, that Carney has decided to not go to a general election. Now, I know you can make an argument that that isn't necessarily what it means, but it sure looks like that's what it fucking means. And so suggests to me that we're not going to have a spring election. That means that at best, if Terrebonne does go the Liberal way, which it ought to, according to Léger's most recent poll, when you look, I think we're at something like 130% in the province of Quebec. Like it's crazy right now, these numbers for Carney. So, knock on wood, you never know. You take zero for
That
granted.
Plains of Abraham speech killed him in Quebec. I don't know if you know that or not.
Well, I mean, in Francophone Quebec, right? He's still okay, even on the
and inflamed separatist sentiment because of its horrible Anglo interpretation of history. Inflamed separatist sentiment and killed the Liberals in Quebec. That's what I heard.
David loves to burst into the fucking Masonic Lodge and give this speech. He just can't get enough of it. So I think it's significant for all those reasons, but I also, a part of me wonders whether, they, like, I remember this, David, and when Paul became prime minister, there was a window in February where we could have called a general election and we chose not to.
Why do you bring this up? Just to fucking ruin my life?
Because it haunts me. It haunts me like a fucking ghost, like one of those terrible Japanese movies from the early 2000s, the little ghostly boys, like it haunts me. And I wonder if this thing could turn out to be their Vancouver. I wonder if this combination of floor crossing and by-election wins, and I'm going to, just for the sake of discussion, assume they win all three, does it put them in a position where they have a numerical majority, but they don't have a working majority, and that they don't control committees and the agenda necessarily in the way that they would like? And does it put them in a situation where they're going to be a year from now going, fuck, I wish we had the ability to call the election. I wish we had called the election. And we've talked ad infinitum about what the difficulties are in this. I'm just saying that this good fortune could, in a weird way, retrospectively look like it's a bit of a handcuff.
Interesting. Jordan, what do you think about the implications of the by-election calls?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Scott. I think it makes the chances of a general election this spring much lower, which I am happy for. Look, I think it will be a fight in Terrebonne. I think that, money is obviously, as Fred has talked about, is going to be a significant factor there. But I think it'll be a fight. I would just observe, I think that although obviously the NDP.
Why do you think it'll be a fight? Can I ask you? Do you
Mhm.
not think that on balance, the people of that riding will pragmatically say, should we be the riding that denies Carney his majority, or should we be the riding that provides Carney with his majority? I mean, that is kind of
Maybe, but it's
I mean,
it's
if you
not.
want to get
You're
a
not
if
talking
you
about
want to get a
defeat.
highway built, there's only one answer to that question.
Oh God, the transactional liberal fucking arrogance of it all, David.
Oh,
Must you be so transparent? A little
oh
art,
French,
please.
but give
A
your
little
fucking
art.
head a shake, people.
Listen, I know the Liberal Party thinks it's God's gift to Quebec and to every riding, and that they should, just fucking like grovel and hope that the Prime Minister will look kindly on them. Look, by-elections remain an opportunity for regions to have a little vote that they're not entirely happy with the government with relatively low stakes. And while it is true that Liberals may see it as high stakes to deny or grant a majority, that doesn't follow that voters will feel the same way. So I think that, again, what's happening in Quebec is obviously changeable, particularly because we're in a really intense and particularly volatile pre-election period in the province. So I don't exclude that things could shift there. I think it will be competitive. And I think it's for sure going to be the one to watch. But I just want to say more broadly, I think that, for those kind of factoring in what's going to happen in those ridings, the NDP is going to be nominating candidates in all three. They've already named the candidates. And the NDP actually holds the seat provincially in two of those seats. So they will be mounting a decent campaign, if for no other reason than it's really important locally for their provincial partners to have the good lists, have the training, have the organizing, reactivate those local networks. So it's not going to be a nothing campaign in those seats.
Wow,
that
that's like more
awkwardly-
advocacy than you're likely to hear in the TELUS ad on this show.
I was just gonna, doesn't that awkwardly obligate us to point out that the one held provincial seat is now that winning MPP is now going to be running as the federal Liberal candidate? So, I mean, I
It's
don't
not
know.
awkward at all. I
Advantage?
think Carney made an excellent
Just to
choice.
say,
Oh, that was a solid effort, Jordan. That was a solid effort, and hopefully somebody will buy you a beer for that. All right.
Very
Well, I
unlikely.
want to jump in on Terrebonne before you switch.
Yeah.
This is the first time in Canadian history that a by-election will determine a majority government or not, and that is the ballot question. Like we always talk about in by-elections, what is a ballot question? What are people really voting for? This is such a straight up easy. Do you want a majority Liberal government or not? And it'll be interesting to see how the Bloc position that and how hard they actually do fight. If we're all afraid of a spring election, of all the opposition parties are denying Carney his majority and something happening later, we know the Liberals have a 3-to-1 spending advantage because they can pool all of their other money into that riding. The Conservatives, I was joking before, they should pool all their money into that one riding and prevent them.
Just
But
take
I
a
don't
second.
if
I know
they'll do
you've
that.
written this, but I don't know if our listeners know about it. Can you just explain this for 1 second?
Sure. So in a by-election, when there's more than one, there's a national cap and you get X amount of dollars per elector. So it's roughly $120,000 or so that you get to spend wherever you want. So there's 3 by-elections. The Liberals will run candidates in all 3, so they get that big cap and they can put it all into one riding. The Bloc Québécois, of course, only run in Quebec, so they don't have those 2 Ontario seats to pool their money. So the Liberals can outspend them 3-to-1 at the national cap level in that.
Well, all right, that's super interesting. All right, Mr. Pinsent, would you please reassemble the accursed for our Hey Yous today?
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. The Hey Yous are about to begin.
Okay, Scott, what do you got?
well, I mean, I know it's pointless, but my Hey You is it goes out to the White House, and I just think it is revolting what we've witnessed. You can have a point of view about the war in the Middle East and Iran, all that sort of stuff, but this shit that the Cardinal in Chicago has called out with the White House, where they release video game footage interspersed with actual war footage. Like, so we are mixing Grand Theft Auto with, scenes that result in the actual death of actual people. Epic fury. The president of the United States is on the phone to reporters going, how do you like the performance? How do you like the performance? These fucking clowns, these cowards, this draft dodging son of a bitch. They, treat this like it's some bro fantasy, haha, look at on TV without any allowance or respect for human life, including Americans, because then when they have the caskets coming home, the president of the United States can't be bothered to stand still. He wears a fucking ball cap. It's just, to me, they're such bad people. They're such bad
The worst.
people. And they prove it over and over again. So it's pointless. It's just like yelling at the sky, but my God, it's just so demoralizing.
Yeah, no question. All right, Jordan. Hey, you.
Yeah, it is so depressing. Scott has brought me down to his level of depression. So my hey you this
That's
week
his
is
superpower.
yeah, he's bringing us all along into Eeyore land.
Welcome. There's stale cake for everyone.
That's good. So my hey you this week is going out to John Tory, who after 2 years of will he won't, he will he won't, he it won't, but didn't just say no. Took out a spread in the Toronto Star in a master class of like self-referential fucking nonsense to explain why in painstaking terms he wasn't going to run for the mayor of Toronto, and not really to put the focus on his family, no, to put the focus on him, not to put the focus on the city, but on him. Look, John Tory made a serious mistake and he took responsibility for it. But you can't go out, or you shouldn't go out looking for pity around that. He made a very public error of judgment that went to his character, which he fully acknowledged happened. And so going around and crying that you're not going to run because somebody might then use that error in judgment that you made publicly and acknowledged you made as part of your record is really whiny. So my hey you is going out to him. Say less, please. And to all of those who are trying to drum up pity for John Tory, I'm sorry, but he was a very powerful man who made a decision and he made a choice. And now there are consequences for that choice. And he took them, and that should be left at that. That's my hey you.
Actually, the most shocking thing about your whole thing there is that he took out an ad in the paper. I had no idea. Who sees an ad in the paper?
None of us.
Well, I mean,
Jordan.
presumably the same people who are going out to try to drum up pity for him. Like it's a very insular,
Jesus.
chattering class conversation. Anyway,
How much
I
can they
found the
charge
whole
for that?
thing really, really silly. And just also a sign that this is somebody who is far more concerned with himself than anything else.
Yeah, he'll be fine.
He's going to be okay.
He's going to be okay. Fred, you got to hey you.
I do, for David Eby and the BC legislature for
Oh.
getting rid of the ridiculous, out of the norm, barbaric standard time. Getting rid of.
You can
the
tell Fred has 4 kids because this
it is
morning.
awful. It's terrible. I'm grateful he's done it, and I hope this
The
spreads
scourge
across
of daylight savings time, as Ralph Goodale
Absolutely.
would call it. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope this spreads across the country. I know Ontario passed legislation, but Quebec and New York have to do it at the same time before it goes into effect. So I hope this begins to snowball.
All party support for this. I like getting my kids out the door. It was excruciating today.
Excellent. All right.
I'll be the
hey
one
you
guy yelling, nay, nay.
Just
What?
because, right?
What do you like?
What's-
I like moving.
Oh.
I mean, it's ridiculous. How much don't you want a little extra day?
Is that the only thing that affects your routine?
That, or, if there's for some reason, there's shortage of liquor, but, yeah, I just, Don't agree.
My hey you goes out to a great Saskatchewanian named Tim Gitzel. Tim Gitzel is my friend from law school, the University of Saskatchewan, who has ended up working in the company called Cameco, who worked his way up through the company called Cameco to be the president of said company. And last week was standing in front of Prime Ministers Modi and Carney, talking to them about $3 billion worth of uranium sales to Cameco and the province of Saskatchewan. Massive, massive deal. I'm just proud of him. It's just so cool. Somebody that I went to law school with has found himself in that position where he's doing such an amazing service for Saskatchewan. So Tim, right? Who'd have known in first year? Anyway, thanks to all you Kirst who watched or listened to the show. Thanks for the three of you for being here. I thought this was, pretty good. We can do better, but I thought it was pretty good conversation.
I've got notes.
Yeah. We'll have a post meeting, a meeting after the meeting, and figure out where we could have done better. But in any event, I think it was fine. Fred, how do you feel about the show?
I'm enjoying it. It's fun. Still trying to figure you guys out and who you are and how this works.
I've been told by many listeners that
felt
they
a little
feel
less
like
full-throated than what I was hoping for.
Yeah,
but...
Fred is a little like afraid of just the not that you're afraid of us, but like a little like too nice, actually.
Fred's polite.
Too polite.
Fred's polite. That was a very polite answer. Well, I'm just learning, what it's like here on the internet with you. It's not exactly the most enthusiastic endorsement I've ever received. It's great. Scroll. Swipe.
Well, we're happy to have you, even if you're not happy to be here. So we'll see you all in a week. Take care of yourselves.